Here we go. Hey everyone, welcome back to week 2 of Ministry and Administrative Skills. This week we are going to cover some very important topics, and you know what I'm talking about. That's right, we're going to talk about strategy, mission, vision, goals, all that kind of stuff. So hang on as we take a whirlwind tour through the world of strategy, missions, goals, etc. This week we're going to talk about these ideas right here. Now, first of all, let's talk about what strategy is. Strategy is the process of determining what your church or organization intends to accomplish, how you will direct the organization and its resources towards accomplishing these goals over the coming months and years. Strategy is simply articulating what we are all about and what we intend to do and how we are going to do it. Now, of course, if you're the leader of an organization, you probably have all these ideas clearly planted in your brain, right? Nobody really needs to tell you what these things are. You know what they are. However, have you considered that just because you think you know what they are, that others in the organization will automatically know and assume what they are? And furthermore, does that necessarily mean that that is an actionable plan to help you guys move forward? So really, strategy is this idea of thinking deeply about what the organization is, articulating it, looking at some of those assumptions, and making it plain, maybe even by putting it together in a formalized document, which is what's called a strategic plan. And we'll get to that in just a little bit. It also means saying no to things outside of your vision and mission and thus stay focused. And let's face it, every church, ministry, organization has lots of opportunity to do lots of good things, right? There's no shortage of opportunities. There's no shortage of demands, of potential things that are really good that you could be involved in. But what a strategy does, it helps you focus like a laser beam. Focus, focus, focus like a laser beam on those things that you know that you are good at. Those things that you have set your mind and your hearts to do. Those things you have clearly articulated and that you have resourced to do so that you could do them effectively. So not only does the strategic plan say yes to some things, it also by definition means saying no to some things. Because if you start to say yes to every opportunity that comes around, you will dilute your effectiveness. You won't be good in any of them. And you'll get taken off track and you'll suffer what's called mission creep or mission drift. Before you know it, you're no longer even in the same category. You're not in the same business anymore, so to speak, of what it is that you are supposed to be about. So that's an important thing too. It says yes and it says no. It involves choices about the mission, goal, and vision you'll pursue, whom you will serve, the organization's role in the community and society, the kinds of services and programs you'll offer, the resources needed to succeed, that is, people, money, expertise, relationships, facilities, all those kinds of tangible resources, and how to best combine these resources to accomplish your organization's mission. It also asks and answers the question, why do we exist? Any organization should be able to articulate and communicate a basic premise. What would the world be missing if we were no longer here? And I know this is kind of abstract and hard to get our minds around, but you know, every church or ministry organization really sort of has to ask this existential question. Why do we exist? Why are we even here? And the more you think about it, the better it helps you to come up with a good answer and a rationale for existing. Because let's face it, every day you're going to get up in the morning, you're going to head into your office or wherever you do your work, and if you don't know why you're even there, what's the point? You could be working for an organization that has a clear mission, that has a clear vision, that has a clear plan, that knows why it's getting there. So if you can't articulate these questions, if you don't know why you exist, guess what? It's going to be hard to convince other people to get on board with you and to serve with you. Strategy also explores what your core competency is. Any organization should know what it does better than others and what it is honestly capable of achieving. Here's the kinds of questions that you need to ask. What is our core competency, the thing that we can do better than others? What is the essence of what we do, not just the form that it currently takes? All right, so again, this is another key strategic kind of question, is what do we do really well? And again, by definition, what don't we do really well? Because let's face it, not everybody does everything well. You have a mission, you have a purpose, you have a passion, you have a set of skills and competencies and experiences that make you unique and that make you better at doing something than a lot of other people. And so as an organization, you have to sort of think of that same mentality too. What do we do that is better than others? What is specific and unique? And again, I know in the church world and ministry, we're not necessarily thinking in terms of competition. Well, what do we do better than the church down the street? We're all in the same mission, right? But you do want to think about what you do really well so that you know your niche in the world, that you fit in, that you serve a vital purpose. And in terms of this idea of what's the essence of we do, sometimes we think that we can confuse the form with the essence. Let me give you a good example. You might have a really thriving youth ministry, and you've been doing it for a couple years now, and it's really happening, and you feel like you have it down to a science, right? You have a meeting on Wednesday night, you have certain activities, you get the kids involved, your youth leaders do mentoring or discipleship, and that's really cool, and that's been working. But what is it that you really do? You minister to kids. You take kids from one stage in life and you help them and you transition them and you counsel them and disciple them to another one. Now, why is that important to make that distinction? Because you know what? The essence of what you do is not going to change, but the form, the means of what you do might change. And I think what happens a lot in the church world is we sort of confuse the means and the form. We confuse the message and the means. And so now all of a sudden the means become gospel for us, right? And so we say, well, we have to have a meeting on Wednesday night. Well, we have to meet at 7 o'clock. Well, we have to have games. We have to have all these things. No, those are the form. You really always need to be thinking about what is the essence of you do. These forms might change over time. Okay, so take that at a church level too. Your church essentially ministers the gospel in your community, right? Well, the form of that may look one way one year, but as the community changes, as people change, as you grow, right, as you face new challenges, crisis, the way you do that might change as well. So never confuse the form with the essence of what you do. That is an important strategic question. So the goal of strategy is to consider the present and consider the desired future and figure out a way to get there. The strategy sets out what your vision is and how you intend to accomplish it. Now, there's something that some organizations do to really encapsulate and articulate their strategy, and this is what's called a strategic plan. More complex organizations formalize their strategy and goals into a strategic plan to make public what their strategy is and how they intend to accomplish it. This helps everyone across the organization know what is important, how they plan to accomplish their mission, and who is responsible for which aspect of the plan. All right, so not everybody needs a strategic plan. You might be kind of small. You might be able to craft it out on a napkin. But again, as your organization grows, it becomes more complex. There's more people involved. There's more division of the labor. It's important to begin to articulate these things in a way that everybody understands. Now, an important part of any strategy is the vision. Let's talk a little bit about that. A key component of the strategic plan is determining the vision for your organization. Vision creates meaning for everyone in the organization. It provides a worthwhile challenge. It is energizing. Vision brings the present into the future. Vision creates a common identity. By the way, these come from Bert Annis. Now, Collins and Porras give us two key components of a vision. First of all, it needs to contain a guiding philosophy that in the context of expected future environments leads to a tangible image. For example, our vision is to become a light on a hill, shining the light on South Lake so that people can see Jesus and desire to share in the advance of his kingdom. All right, so that's kind of a big, lofty vision, right? Wouldn't it be great if this happened? And sometimes we think, well, we don't want to shoot too high because we don't want to fail. Nonsense. Vision, this is the place where you shoot for the moon. It should be something that's so big that you really could never accomplish it, and you couldn't accomplish it on your own without the help of the Lord himself, right? So it really should be lofty, it should be grand, because these are the kinds of things that get people excited about participating in your organization. So if you just say, oh, we're here to minister to the community, well, that's nice, you know. But if you say, hey, we are here to be a light, to reach, to advance the gospel, these kinds of larger existential goals that are really tied into our values, that's the kind of thing that people can get excited about and they could see themselves participating in. Now, of course, we don't just create vision out of thin air, do we? So let's take a look at a perspective, a faith-filled perspective here. Since we believe that God is already present and at work in our church and ministry, developing a vision is not a matter of creation from scratch, but rather discerning what God is already doing. And of course, this takes prayer, discussion, and verbalizing what you perceive He to be doing in your midst. So, again, you know, sometimes I think we have this kind of misguided idea that you know, a leader walks into a room and emerges, you know, sort of with the golden tablets. Maybe I'm talking about, you know, the Mormons here, but he emerges and all of a sudden he sort of has this vision that's sort of like out of the blue, right? Well, that's one way. However, we believe that the vision is something that can be discerned. In other words, if we look at current circumstances, if we look at the environment, and we look at a track record, we can see the things that God is already doing in our midst. So that way our vision is consonant, it's resonant. Because if you come up with a vision that's like sort of out of the, you know, sky blue, guess what? People are going to look at it and say, well, it's enticing, it's interesting, but I don't really see that as part of something that's going on in our current context, right? So discerning then is a way of seeing what God is already doing, what He's already up to, and crystallizing and articulating and say, yes, this is what we believe God is doing in our midst right now, and this is the way we encapsulate it in terms of a vision. All right, does that make sense? All right, it's not just something created from scratch, but it's a discernment rather of what God is already doing. And I think that will give you a vision that resonates with people, and that moreover is, you know, reflective of God's heart and what He is doing, right? So that you don't come up with some vision and He's like, oy vey, you know, what are these people doing? Can't they see what I am doing in their midst, right? So don't be so blind that you can't see what God's already doing. Now, another idea here is something I call finding the fit. Determining the course for the future involves finding the fit amongst these three forces: the organizational vision, the outside opportunities and threats, and the organizational capabilities. And let's see what this would look like in terms of a graphic form here. So first of all is the vision, what we hope to accomplish. We just talked about that. Then, of course, we have to look at things like opportunities and threats. So what would these be? Well, opportunities might be the needs of the community, people who compete with us, people that we work together, allies, etc. And then, of course, social, economic, political, and technological forces, right? So take, for example, the internet, right? Many people see the internet as an opportunity for ministry, right? Because why? Because you can reach really unique, niche kind of, you know, groups of people. You can, you know, be 24/7. You can be global, right? So the internet presents an opportunity. Now, it also could be seen as a threat too, right? We know there's a lot of sewage that comes through there. But ministry-minded people can take advantage of it as an opportunity to communicate, to connect, to build virtual communities, all these kinds of things. So that's sort of a new thing that people weren't really thinking about, you know, 10, 15 years ago. That's pretty common now, that is a new opportunity. And then, of course, there's the strengths and weaknesses. And this is capabilities, resources, and what you can do best. And as I mentioned earlier, not every organization does everything well. You have to think about what you do well and what you don't do well, and then capitalize on those strengths. And so you put all these things together, and you come up with the fit, right? So again, as the leader, it's your job to think about these things, to think about what your vision is, what the opportunities and threats are, and what your strengths or weaknesses, and pull them all together to find the fit for your organization. Now, let's get real specific here and talk about something called goal setting. You may have heard this one. This isn't brand new, but goals should be SMART. They should be specific, measurable, attractive, realistic, and timely. All right, so these are what we call our SMART goals, right? So goals that are vague and nebulous are not very good because they don't have these elements. Now, let me give you some examples here. Now, a bad goal, to win souls for Christ and help our church to grow. Well, you might say, well, that sounds like a great goal. Well, why isn't it a good one? It's attractive and realistic, and of course it's biblical, but it's not specific or measurable or timely. It's too vague for a goal. Let me give you a better example here. Now, this would be a better goal. To recruit 20 people to distribute 5,000 tracts in our neighborhood and personally share the gospel with 100 people and invite them to church within the next 6 months. Now, you see it has the essence of the above goal, right? But it's much more specific. It's measurable, it's attractive, it's realistic and biblical, and it's timely. Now, in addition to goals, a good plan has what are called objectives and initiatives. Behind every goal should be objectives and initiatives. These are short-term, measurable steps designed to move an organization towards the achievement of long-term goals. They provide support for the measurement and accountability of goals, and they include things like personnel, budget, and means and metrics for assessing. So let me give you an illustration right here. Okay, so say one of your goals here is for your church to become a place where people can grow in their knowledge of the Word of God. All right, so that's a pretty good goal, but again, it's a bit lofty. What about if we add some specificity to it and give it this objective? To investigate the best means for people to learn within our church in context and culture. All right, so this might sort of be your first step. Say you have no real teaching ministry going on at all other than the Sunday morning. So what would some strategic initiatives be? Well, here's something, for example, determine the current needs of the congregation. All right, and so you appoint a responsible person there. You look at the resources required, and you ask, what's the current status of this? And you also have your target metrics to meet the objectives. So in other words, how do you know when you've actually met this initiative? And then you give it a time frame. All right, so this grid here can be used, imagine a document that has, several pages of these goals and strategic initiatives, and this becomes the basis of your strategic plan. It's very specific. People get it, they understand it, they know their role, they go through and they highlight their names on there, right? They look at the dates and they put those dates on their calendars and say, all right, here's the 3 things that I need to do or 10 things I need to do to contribute to the overall accomplishment of our organization's strategic plan. Now, you might say, well, why even bother doing all this stuff? Well, first of all, it can lead to improved results. And let's face it, we all have lots of things to do. Nobody wants to be involved in an organization that's not going anywhere, that really is ineffective, right? And you might say, well, effective, that sounds like such a, kind of business, secular kind of term. Guess what? God wants us to be effective. He wants us to accomplish His mission, right? So don't feel like it's unspiritual to try to be effective. We need to be as effective as we can. As we talked about in week 1, we are stewards of the resources that God has given us. And one of those resources is time. And so if we don't think about what we're doing, if we don't think about the best way to do it, if we don't make a plan to do it, we're not being very good stewards of the time or the resources, right? We're sort of like the guy who shoots the arrow and then says, draws the target around us. Says, that's what we reached. That's one approach, right? But it doesn't really help us accomplish long-term effective goals. It gives momentum and focus to the organization. People like to see things written down, and thinking about it really helps with these things. It leads to problem solving. And let me just mention this here. Let me pause right for a second. The end result of all of this strategy and all this planning and stuff is not the document that you end up with. Some people might say, well, this is sort of like the Holy Grail. Look, we have our document. That is not the greatest purpose here. The greatest purpose is to get people together into the room who can actually talk and have conversations about things, maybe difficult conversations, maybe about things that you haven't been talking about in a long time. Maybe there's been some elephants in the room. These kinds of processes get the conversation going and get people thinking collaboratively about where you are going. And so it's a great problem-solving tool. Will there be problems? Will there be conflicts and disagreements? Yes, yes, and yes. But you need to learn how to work together and collaborate in order to accomplish these long-term goals. Okay, so don't confuse this end document with the ultimate purpose. It really is to get people in the room and to get people talking and thinking about what is important to them and how they're going to go about doing it. Teamwork, learning, and commitment. Communication and marketing. Greater influence. Now, strategic planning can also have some limitations. The cost can outweigh the benefit. You can develop a poor plan based on bad data, false assumptions, etc. And let's face it, sometimes intuition and creative muddling are sometimes superior to traditional planning. All right, so sometimes you might have, lightning might strike you or two of you as you're walking down the hallway, right? That's great. You can use that. Now, I think you should take those ideas, submit them to the reflective process, and put some meat on those bones, right? So a hallway conversation might be a good starting point, but sometimes the inspiration and the vision comes sort of, not when you're sitting in a room with 10 other people. It might come from lots of places, but you need to then subject it to that process, to that investigation, challenging assumptions and all those sorts of things. Sometimes there's critical problems that should be addressed first, right? So if the building's burning, right, you need to put that building out before you start laying out the architecture for your next 3 buildings, right? And then, of course, when implementation is unlikely. So you might say, hey, I got a great idea. I'm going to get my team together and come up with a plan. And then, at the end of the day, it's like, so what? Nobody cares about your plan because you didn't get sufficient buy-in, et cetera, et cetera. All right, so let's talk about some of the steps in developing a strategic plan. First of all, you want to get organized, determine the time, place, people to be involved, if a consultant is needed, getting the okay to proceed. All right, so if you get the okay to proceed, it'll avoid that last step I just talked about. But this is important. You want to get the right people in the room. Not just people that think like you, not just people from your department, but people from across the organization, people with lots of different perspectives. People who really get what you're about, what the organization is about, and really are invested into the organization. People that love the organization and want to see it prosper. That's important. And don't be afraid to get people who might bring a little bit of heat to the room. You might say, oh, I'm not going to bring to that person because I know that they're always doing this. Develop some guidelines for getting along, for the conversation, for the meeting, but you want to allow those voices because guess what? They challenge your assumptions. They sharpen you. They bring a broader perspective to bear upon the process other than people that just think like you do. Take stock, do a situational analysis, get the necessary background, review the past, the present, possible futures. And this leads to what's something that's called the SWOT analysis, right? And this stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And I talked about that before. But you want to do this before you start laying out the specifics, right? So do your SWOT analysis and take stock of all the variables, all the changing contexts that are going on around you. Identify key issues or choices. And then you want to set the direction, develop the vision, determine how to move the organization towards its future, develop a first draft of the plan. All right, so it might take you a while to actually come up with this, document at the end. It's going to take many meetings. It could take several months, maybe even 6 months to come up with a really solid plan. Again, it kind of depends on the size of the organization, but this could take time. So don't be afraid to start with some baby steps. Refine and adopt the plan. Implement it, and then monitor the progress. And again, a good plan should have some really specific, measurable points on there by which you can point to and say, yes, we accomplished this. We have some data that supports the accomplishment of these plans. Hallelujah, we are moving towards accomplishing our strategy, right? And then make adjustments. Now, by the way, adjust and periodically update. By the way, once you develop this does not mean this is set in stone and concrete forever and ever. As you notice, there's status updates on there. Those things are going to continually need to be revised, right? an opportunity might come up that you say, we didn't have this opportunity a year ago when we first developed the plan. So the plan should be a living, breathing document. It doesn't mean, well, a new plan comes up, you throw it out the window, or a new opportunity comes up, you throw it out the window, but you say, this is something now, this is part of our contextual analysis, right? Our SWOT analysis that wasn't on the horizon 6 months ago. We need to adopt and be able to, to accommodate this within our plan. Or you might say, this is a good idea, but we've got these other 3 things cooking now. Let's put this on the back burner, and we'll consider that in a year from now. All right, so again, don't look at this as something that can never be changed or looked at. It's a living, changing, breathing document. How often should you go through this process? It depends how big you are. Really you should be setting 3 to 5 year goals in a planning process like this. So therefore, every 3 to 5 years, you need to be revisiting this, redoing it, looking at whether you accomplished the old one, whether maybe there's still some things that carry over into a new one that you want to execute in the future. You need to stay realistic. Here's some things to consider before launching into a strategic planning initiative. Do we really need a strategic plan? Again, you might be small, there might be 3 of you or 8 of you. If you're a small organization, you can typically pull things together through this verbal communication, through your network of people. But once you start to get big, once you have multiple departments, right? So I would say if you're a church of any size, more than 200-300 people, you probably should have some sort of strategy, because there's a lot of people now. There's a lot of staff, there's a lot of volunteers, there's a lot of variables in there that need to come together in order to stay on vision, stay on task. So the first question really is, do we need this? What is your experience with planning? If you have no experience, you might want to bring somebody in from the outside who's done this, who can help you, maybe not disinterested, but an interested outsider. Sometimes the challenge here is that the leader will come in and run the planning process, and the plan ends up just looking like, like him or her, right? So just a reflection of what they've thought about. It really doesn't have that larger outside perspective. So while you need key leaders in the room, sometimes it's good to have an outsider, a third party, sort of mediate the different views in the room, so that it isn't just a reflection of one person's, experience. How much time do you have to devote to the process? Who's going to lead it? I just talked about that. Who and which groups will be involved. And again, this is a key step. You really want to think about this up front. Who's going to be involved in this whole process? Get the key players, the key stakeholders, a diverse group of interests into the room, because if you get a lot of different people in there and they're involved in the planning, guess what? They will be more likely to champion the plan, to champion the initiatives, to run with it. If you have 3 people in the room and they come up with a plan and deliver it to a large organization, there's no buy-in, there's no support, there's no sense of urgency, there's no ownership, right? People want to feel like they've been involved in the development of the plan in order for them to get really excited about it. So you can get, people will do what they need to do, but if you want to get people gung-ho and committed, bring them into the process. Well, I guess that's about it. So anyhow, I kind of went long today. Hopefully this was helpful to you. Again, strategy, mission, goals, vision, planning, these are all crucial management and administrative competencies, and I hope that you can grow and develop in these. In our activities and discussion this week, I have a few things for you to really practice and to think about and refine your thinking and knowledge of these as well. So that should be exciting as well. So bless you guys. We will see you online.